Today we're going to talk about leveraging hackers for continuous security. So first, a little bit about myself. I'm Mikhail Prince. I'm one of the 4 founders of HackerOne. What is HackerOne? Well, HackerOne is we are the largest vulnerability coordination and bug bounty platform. We have over 100,000 registered hackers on our platform and over 700 customers. And some of our best customers include GitHub, Slack, the Department of Defense, but also Coinbase, Square, and some of the largest credit card processors. And I want to tell you 2 little fun facts to kind of break the ice here. At HackerOne, we call each other HackerOnies. It's the common mispronunciation of our company name. HackerOne sounds kind of delicious, though, but yeah. This photo here is of me and my co-founder, and we literally know each other since we are 1 year old. So we go back a while. Before I founded HackerOne, I was a hacker myself. I was also a software engineer. I am still a hacker, and I still code as well. I kind of go back and forth between the 2, and it depends on my mood. Sometimes I like to break something. Sometimes I like to build something. So don't feel shy to post any hacker-related questions. I'll happily answer them. Before everybody now turns off their phones in airplane because there's a scary hacker on the stage, I wanted to clear up one common misconception about what a hacker is. Because the mainstream media kind of like portrays this bad picture of like hackers are bad and they steal your credit card information, but they're not. We call those type of people malicious attackers. And what we call a hacker at HackerOne is one who enjoys the intellectual challenge of creatively overcoming limitations. And to me, that kind of clearly captures 2 of the main characteristics of every hacker, because they're very creative and they have extreme curiosity. They always want to poke around and find something. So they're not scary. All right, so we've covered the basics here. We all know what a hacker is. And let's start with an industry trend observation. If we kind of go back a while, there was always this fight between like the developers and the security team. It was never like a really healthy relationship. They were always fighting with each other. They hate each other. They don't really work well together. And I think now I'm kind of see a point that this is changing. I see a trend where this is changing. Because modern developers realize they make mistakes. We're all human after all. And it's going to be inevitable you're introducing a vulnerability at some point in your career, if not multiple. And that's totally OK. I mean, we all make mistakes. But also, the modern engineer embraces continuous software development. So with that also comes the need for continuous security. I mean, we're all starting to deploy on a daily basis, which means that like we can't rely on traditional penetration testing that only happens on a quarterly basis, because every day we run the risk of introducing a new vulnerability. So the modern engineer really knows this and starts to think more proactively about how we solve security. And at HackerOne, we like to think and we like to say that the modern security is also hacker-powered. So, oh, they're friends again. So before we dive into what hacker-powered security is, I want to do a little bit of a thought experiment of what a hacker goes through when they find a vulnerability and when they want to report a vulnerability. So the first step they do is, of course, try to find if a company has some kind of published process, like a disclosure policy or an email address or something like that. If they don't, which is very likely, because in our research it showed that 94% of the Forbes 1000 companies does not have a defined process. They might try your support department. Is that going to work? Unlikely, because they may not know what the hacker is even talking about. Commonly, we see they try to get the attention of the CEO on Twitter by sending them urgent tweets. Or they email the CTO on LinkedIn, but it gets buried in recruiter emails in their email inbox. Or they post it on Facebook. Hey, guys, you need to look at this. All these outcomes are pretty terrible, because it's not how you want to be notified about a security vulnerability. But one more common way of how it happens is actually a lot of hackers will not even try to contact you at all. And most of that is because of fear. Like, it's pretty common for a hacker to be the unknown of the response of the company, of how they're going to react, is definitely causing fear, and they may not reach out because of that. And it's understandable, because most of, like, if we go back a few years, the FBI would come knocking your door because you were reporting a vulnerability. That was something illegal and not something you were supposed to do. And in my opinion, it's also one of the worst outcomes, because this means that somebody out there knows about a vulnerability in your systems, and someone else could find that too. A bad person could also find that same vulnerability, and they're definitely not going to contact you. And actually, this problem is something me and my co-founder ran into all the time. Like we would find vulnerabilities in services we were using or APIs we were integrating with, and it was always a challenge to contact the right company, to contact the right person at the company. And this is one example from Airbnb. A while back, before they even started setting up a program like this, they had a security page. It was airbnb.com/security, and we found a vulnerability, and we wanted to report it to them. But this page was literally talking about what to do when your home was vandalized by guests. And obviously a page they needed to have, but it was not talking about actual system vulnerabilities in Airbnb. Luckily, we were able to establish contact through some other method, but it again confirms that not every hacker is going to do that. A lot of hackers will be, OK, I'm not going to try. I don't know what the answer is going to be. It's going to be scary. And that's, of course, bad. Back to hacker-powered security. What is hacker-powered security? We see it as two different approaches, two different phases even. Let's start with the most simple one on the left. It's vulnerability coordination, and it's very much a reactive approach where you are publishing a contact method somewhere on your website or somewhere on a platform like HackerOne, where you are informing people what your process is if they find a vulnerability. So it could be, contact us at this email address, here are the rules, don't do this, and don't do this. The DoD likes to call this the see something, say something of the digital world. Some others refer to it as rolling out the welcome mat for hackers. And another item here is that vulnerability coordination is something I increasingly see get included in compliance. And I think the front runners here are in the healthcare and automotive industry, because there's a lot of controversial hacking going on there, and they're physical devices like a car or a medical device. But I'm predicting a similar transformation in the finance space, where this will become more important in compliance. Moving on to bug bounty is where it's actually a layer on top of vulnerability coordination. And this is where you're going to actively incentivize hackers by offering cash rewards for valid vulnerabilities. And that makes it a more proactive approach. So instead of just let us know if you find something, you're actively going to ask people to hack you. And if they find something, you'll pay them a reward based on the severity of the vulnerability. It's also a way where a lot of engineers learn security through very practical examples, because somebody is literally telling you what you did wrong. And you can learn a lot from that, because it's an example that's for your company specifically. It's not some random theoretical example. A lot of companies use it to save money on traditional pen tests. It doesn't necessarily replace pen tests, but it definitely helps you inform where you need to do more penetration testing. Because if you're seeing a particular part of your stack or a particular application that has a lot of vulnerabilities, then using that information, you can laser focus your penetration testing efforts and make that more efficient. Because you need to remember, a bug bounty you incentivize based on results, and penetration testing, the consultants get paid by the hour. So you definitely want to make sure that you're using their time efficiently. And a topic I want to dig a little bit deeper into is that bug bounty is also the cherry on top of the software development lifecycle. And I have a few slides on that in particular. So let's zoom in on this a little bit. And how can bug bounties add to your SDLC? Well, it starts with a bug. I mean, a bug starts in development. Someone makes a mistake, a bug gets into production. Bugs also end in development, because you're feeding them into the same process. You identify the bug, you roll out a fix. It goes through the same cycle of how you develop the software. Also, QA, even automated or human, it doesn't matter. It's also part of the SDLC. And bug bounties are a form of QA, because it allows you to have hundreds or thousands of eyes, of creative and curious eyes, looking over your systems 24/7. You can kind of see that as maybe your friendly neighborhood watch. And especially if you deploy, you develop Agile and you deploy often, maybe as often as multiple times a day, you also want to have a solution that keeps up with that pace of innovation and the pace of deployment and code getting pushed out. Because just relying on your quarterly pen test is not going to cut it anymore. Like, the minute you push new code out of the door, the pen test is outdated. And you want to have something that is continuous. And bug bounties are the form of agile security. Because with the right incentives and the right aligned incentives with where you want to have hackers look at, there's always hackers looking for vulnerabilities in your systems. And to pick a little on continuous delivery, there's a dedicated test stage. And of course, you want to do as much as you can in terms of security in the test stage, such as maybe static code analysis or automated vulnerability scanning, all these standard things that you want to include in there. But then you also want something that is continuously looking everywhere they can for vulnerabilities. And that is what we call continuous security. Some of the best bug bounty programs also take it a little further. And they basically take the output of their bug bounty and use that to inform their decisions and priorities. So analyzing your bug bounty data literally tells you where you need to focus your efforts, what kind of initiatives in terms of security you have to prioritize. Examples are, for instance, let's say you have a bug bounty and it points out that you have a lot of cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. That could mean that there's bad coding practice, or it could mean that there's the lack of a standardized secure defaults web framework that everything is built on top of. So that kind of informs you what you have to prioritize. Or even on this chart here, another interesting one is you can clearly see here is that the number of XSS findings is tapering off after July. So you could definitely see this as proof that your measures against XSS, maybe you've implemented some global rule, is definitely working. And you can see that in the chart because nobody's finding them anymore. And some other things are, which I always find interesting, it's going to tell you what part of your stack is the weakest link. Sometimes it even informs some of our customers, it even informs them about applications they didn't even know they had because it was part of an acquisition and they never knew that was running on their cloud. So I think that's always interesting side effects of running a bug bounty. OK, so what if your company does not have a bug bounty program? Well, there's still a few good ways you can learn as a developer about security. And many engineers do that using HackerOne's HACKTIVITY feed. This is kind of a list of publicly disclosed vulnerabilities. Members of the community get to upvote these. It's kind of like Reddit style where you upvote the best post. And companies have the benefit of extreme transparency towards their end users by disclosing things. Hackers get the fame from, hey, I hacked this company, and I'm awesome. Look at how good of a hacker I am. And for everybody else, it's a way to learn from very real, practical examples of vulnerabilities other companies suffered from. And in my opinion, there's no better way of learning a particular trait than just seeing really practical examples. So I actually wanted to give a very practical example. So early this morning, I was drinking a little coffee, and I was looking over our HACKTIVITY feed to see if I could find a vulnerability in one of our customers that was disclosed and interesting for this audience. And I found something from a HackerOne customer, itBitExchange. They're a Bitcoin trading platform, and had a really interesting vulnerability. So I wanted to talk through that a little bit. So this report was found by a HackerOne hacker for Lemon, and he identified a way where he could produce money by sending basically small amounts of Bitcoin from his own account to his own account. And what he identified is that basically if the amount was small enough, it would add to his balance, but it would never deduct it. So effectively, you're producing a lot of money. What he also noted is that there was no protection in place for like rate limiting or one-time password to confirm a transaction. So he could repeat the same trick over and over again to produce a large amount of money in his wallet. Luckily, very positive response from the customer. Of course, they really appreciated that he fixed it, that he submitted this report. The company fixed it very fast, and they paid him $1,000 bounty as a thank you for being a good citizen. And what we can learn from this, I think, is if you look at how they were doing the transaction, they were actually representing the amounts in floating point math. And if you're dealing with financial transactions, it's always a little bit tricky if you're using floating point math, especially when you're doing rounding of amounts. So what likely happened here is that they were rounding the amounts, and somehow the check for adding to the balance and deducting from the balance was a little bit different, effectively resulting in creating more money in your balance. I think what they could have done here, and what they probably did after fixing it, is representing the amounts in the lowest unit possible. For Bitcoin, that would be representing in Satoshis or something like that. So that was a really, really interesting bug. If this triggered your interest in this is a really interesting vulnerability, there's many more on our HACKTIVITY feed. And it's really like the largest database of real exploitable vulnerability information. And it's not like theoretical or like these far-fetched security things you see on some other sites. And what I hear from a lot of developers around me always is that they got into security because of HackerOne's HACKTIVITY, and that's kind of what triggered their initial interest. And some of them now actively participate in bug bounties and make some money on the side, and others use it at work to produce more secure code. And one example I always like to bring up here is that of Dan Leck. He's a software engineer at Trello, and Trello was basically exploring the use of Slack for team communication. And he was leading the team of doing the evaluation and seeing if that would be able to replace their solution at the time. And while he was doing that, he uncovered some security bugs. He was of course testing the application of what can it do, but he was also trying to integrate with it because every developer wants to make sure that all of their integrations with Slack are working properly. And while he was doing that, he found some interesting bugs. I mean, on the feed we can see a $700 bounty, a $1,500 bounty, and you could say they're probably very interesting security bugs. And he reported those through Slack, and they got fixed. He got paid for it, so he made a few dollars by just being a good citizen and a helpful citizen. And if we now fast forward a few months, he's actually running the Trello bug bounty program. So he not only was a software engineer at Trello, now he got really interested in security, and he's the one that rooted for setting up a bug bounty at Trello, and he's now the one managing that program as well. So I think that's a very interesting success story from an engineer getting into security and learning a lot from it. Cool. I don't know how I'm doing on time, but questions? In your experience, what is a reasonable reward for serious and critical bugs? This really depends on your security maturity. So some of our more advanced customers that have run a bug bounty for a long time and their maturity is very secure, or maturity is very high, they pay into the $10,000 and $20,000 for critical vulnerabilities. Then if you're just starting out, some of them pay maybe $500. Maybe they pay $1,000 for a critical. If we look platform-wide, the average bounty is around $500 per bug. What is the strangest vulnerability you have discovered? OK. The strangest one. I've discovered a lot of vulnerabilities, but the strangest one, I think, was really interesting because this goes back a long time. This was when I was still in high school. And when me and my co-founder graduated from high school, we actually found this. We graduated, and we wanted to congratulate everyone. So we found this broadcast TV channel that our school used to communicate schedule changes. And we found a way to change the broadcast. And we changed the broadcast. We put our text on it with our faces. And hey, everybody, congratulations with your graduation. I thought that was a pretty interesting vulnerability because it connects hacking with something very physical in the world.